We'll now move on to agenda item 5, which is the Basildon Borough Draft Local Plan and preliminary draft community infrastructure levy charging schedule. Firstly, can I draw members' attention to the revised recommendation which has been circulated this evening, and which I'm sure Councillor Moore will refer to when presenting this report, as set out on page 12 of the agenda. All council has two options this evening in connection with the report. I now hand over.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do wish to Council to note that I have withdrawn the draft community infrastructure levy preliminary charging schedule from the Council recommendation. The reason I have made this decision is that, having attended the Policy Development and Review Scrutiny Subcommittee on Tuesday and listened to the views of all members, I feel it is only right for this document to go to scrutiny prior to consultation. This does not affect the draft local plan itself and does not affect the publication of any of the infrastructure evidence which will go ahead along with the draft local plan. As a consequence of this, I will revise the local development scheme to reflect this change. Mr. Mayor, you will recall that the Council has already run a major consultation known as the Core Strategy in 2014 regarding local planning priorities. This consultation resulted in over 10,000 comments from respondents to the consultation addressing a range of issues. A key issue arising from these comments was the need for more detail to be provided around the allocation of land to meet the need for development and change and the infrastructure required to support this. The Council addressed this by changing its approach in December 2014 so that there was a more comprehensive approach to plan making. Tonight sees the result of that new approach. The draft local plan sets out a 20-year strategy for the borough, setting out the amount of new development to be provided over the planned period 2014 to 2034. It also identifies the specific locations for the provision of new development and also the infrastructure needed to support that development. It also sets out development management policies required to ensure that new development is of a high quality, is safe and sustainable, and does not cause harm to the most valuable parts of our natural environment. A comprehensive evidence base supports the draft local plan. You will see from the report that the evidence includes the emerging strategic housing market assessment information, a green belt study, housing and economic land availability assessment, various highways mitigation studies, and outline landscape appraisals of strategic sites. New evidence for the objectively assessed need, known as the OAN, has been prepared using the 2011 census data, the 2012 based ONS population projections, the 2012 based CLG household projections, and mid-year population estimates up to 2014. The evidence has a 2014 base with projections to 2037. An all-member briefing was held on November the 23rd to provide all members with a detailed overview of the emerging findings of the evidence of Basildon's objectively assessed need. Key emerging findings indicated that Basildon Borough's OAN for housing were between 763 to 837 homes per annum until 2037. The draft local plan recommends seeking a delivery level of 763 homes per annum. This equates to 15,260 homes over the 20-year plan period 2014 to 2034. Since 2014, the base year for the OAN, 678 new homes have been built, which can be deducted from the dwelling requirement. This leaves a requirement of 14,582 homes to be built in the remaining 19 years of the plan. Included in this number will be specialist accommodation, including 1,622 specialist places for older people, such as sheltered housing and extra care homes, 720 additional bed spaces within residential care or nursing homes, 3,600 affordable homes and 104 pitches for travellers. Once the borough's urban capacity is accounted for, there is a need for the draft local plan to deliver some 8,000 homes on the land within our green belt. There would normally be a presumption against new development in the green belt, but all local planning authorities have an obligation under the National Planning Policy Framework to meet their OAN for housing and through the plan making process undertake a review of their green belt to identify whether there is any suitable land in the green belt that could be released for development. This would result in revisions to the green belt boundary shown on the draft local plan policies map that will accompany the draft local plan if and when it goes out to public consultation. There is also a need for a total of 49 hectares, that's around 120 acres, of employment land within the borough. This, if used effectively, unlocks the potential to generate up to 8,500 jobs locally over the planned period. The majority of employment land will be recycled vacant and underused land currently allocated for employment purposes. We have worked with infrastructure and service providers to identify the need for infrastructure to support growth. This includes the requirement for schools and nurseries, healthcare services, highways and public transport improvements, drainage and flood risk management infrastructure, utility infrastructure and broadband infrastructure. We have identified infrastructure requirements for each specific development location to be delivered alongside the proposed homes and jobs. This includes major transport upgrades to improve capacity of the road network and junctions, including widening of the A127 and the A13, a new junction on the A127 to serve Wickford and Pitsea and East Basildon, a southern relief road for Billericay, and localised enhancements around Basildon, Billericay and Wickford town centres. A local plan working group was set up by the chairman of the Overview and Scrutiny Commission. 4 workshops and a separate member briefing on the OAN were arranged between November and December last year, all of which were independently facilitated. The scrutiny function has influenced the development of the draft local plan and enabled most members of the council to be involved in the process. The draft local plan has been prepared to follow the structure of the National Policy Planning Framework, employing the same thematic chapter headings as the MPPF. This helps us to ensure the plan is compliant with the MPPF. The first 4 chapters of the draft local plan set out the context in which the draft local plan has been prepared. Chapter 5 sets out the spatial vision for Basildon for the period 2014 to 2034. And the following chapters set out in some detail how the borough will build a strong competitive economy, ensure the vitality of our town centres, promote sustainable transport, support communications infrastructure with superfast broadband, deliver a wide choice of quality homes, require good design requirements, promoting health communities, the green belt, and meeting the challenges of climate change and flooding, and conserving our natural environment, and of course conserving our historic environment. I should say at this point that you will recall that early last year a consultation was undertaken jointly with Brentwood Borough Council to a proposal for a cross-boundary development known as Dunton Garden Suburb. The outcomes of the consultation, which are summarised in the Dunton Garden Suburb Statement of Consultation, indicated a need for additional evidence to show that this is the most appropriate location for development within Brentwood Borough, and that the scale of development proposed can be supported by infrastructure. At this time, Basildon Council cannot support such a proposal, as Brentwood have not made available sufficient evidence to indicate that this is the most appropriate approach to the location of development in their area. If Brentwood were to do this as part of their local plan development, then we would have to give it further consideration as part of the duty to cooperate. If approved tonight, the Council will launch an 8-week public consultation on the draft local plan that will start at the end of January. I would like to take this opportunity to thank officers, particularly the planning policy team, who have worked exceptionally hard to prepare the draft local plan. It has been a huge workload commitment that I personally have much appreciated. 1,500 pages of documentation for the Cabinet report and 500 pages for tonight's Council report is testament to their dedication and hard work for this Council. Finally, Mr. Mayor, I have to say, some members will agree with the draft local plan, perhaps reluctantly. Some will disagree with the draft local plan, perhaps vigorously. Yet tonight is not, and I repeat, tonight is not about agreeing or disagreeing with the local plan. Tonight is about giving authority for the draft local plan to be issued for public consultation. I encourage members to vote for this recommendation, and I would also ask all members to engage with the process and respond to the consultation when the consultation goes out to the public at the end of January. I really do expect 41 councillors to respond to the consultation. Mr. Mayor, we need to reflect for a moment on what happens if we don't approve the local plan to go out to public consultation tonight. It would mean that we couldn't submit a sound local plan to the government by early 2017. The government has confirmed its intention in a consultation paper issued in December to change the way the new home loan is awarded in the circumstances where local planning authorities have not submitted a local plan by March next year. This could be as much as £400,000 for Basildon. The Prime Minister, the Chancellor and the Secretary of State for Communities and Local Government have clearly stated that if the local planning authority does not submit a local plan by early 2017, then the government would step in and do it for us at our cost. Mr. Mayor, this is our plan. This is Basildon's plan. We might not like it, but it is our plan. It is not the government's plan. Mr. Mayor, the recommendation is for the Council to give authority for the draft local plan to go out to public consultation. Let us give the authority tonight. Let us hear what the public thinks of the plan. Let the public have their say. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move to give instructions requiring the Cabinet to reconsider the matter and bring the back to full council. Our specific objections are: it has not been taken into account the overwhelming extent of the objections received during the consultation on the core strategy to spatial option 2A, which is demonstrably unfair and disadvantages Basildon residents south of the A127 in terms of population density, people per hectare, and the bulk of employment land provision.
Mr. Mayor, can I just ask...
No, he's got the
Excuse me.
Mr. Mayor, can I say, I know this, but I'm waiting for papers, so can we just hold for a moment?
Could you hold on for a moment?
Cheers.
Have you a second then?
Yes.
Okay. Would you like to outline, continue your outline?
Okay. Look, you've just got it as number 2. The purpose of this consultation is to seek the views of residents, businesses and other stakeholders on the draft policies and allocations set out in the draft local plan, and any reasonable alternatives to these policies and allocations as identified in the alternative option boxes. Despite capacity to build 29,000 homes on Greenbelt, the plan fails to provide any other optional Greenbelt sites to those identified in the plan. It also fails to provide any alternative options for employment land across the borough. There has been no member input or scrutiny of proposals to release large areas of land from the Greenbelt. Any alternative sites to those set out in the draft plan would indeed have to be consulted upon further at a further cost to this council. We have failed to minimise developments in the Greenbelt, and especially in very critical areas, policy H13, land east of Basildon, and H10, West Basildon Urban Extension, and E7, Dunton Extension, and no alternative sites found. The mix of both residential and employment land within close proximity in the West Urban Extension is also considered unsafe. We have included traveller sites in the Greenbelt, contrary to planning policy. The OAN is considered an unnecessary over-provision. It fails to build on the consultation results from the core strategy and provide sufficient detail upon which residents can make an informed decision about whether or not we have got the balance right between homes and jobs and or alternative options for the business community to consider. It fails to present an accurate spatial portrait of the borough about our population and demography. We would not be consulting on a draft local plan unless we are confident that the necessary infrastructure is deliverable by our partner agencies, including health provision, policing, schools and road transport networks. Thank you.
Here.
Would you, your seconder, like to speak, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you're aware, for expediency, that was a summary of all of our views, rather than us all stand up and ask for individual references to be referred back to Cabinet. I'm going to focus on the first issue. At its meeting held in September 2014, Cabinet formally noted and acknowledged the responses to the 8-week public consultation on the local plan core strategy revised preferred option report. The Council's preferred spatial option 2A distributed growth based on existing settlement populations, with the remainder of growth split between the service settlements of Crays Hill, Ramsden Bellhouse and Bowes Gifford and the Plotland areas. This amounted to 63% of growth to Basildon, 16% to Billericay, 18% to Wickford and 2% to the service settlements and plotments. To my knowledge, and the Cabinet member has confirmed, over 10,000 comments were received, together with a number of petitions. There were 7 main areas that generated responses, one of which was distribution of growth. Firstly, my main concern centres around respondents' views on distribution of growth, particularly as the majority of respondents opposed that option 2A, and I note that the draft local plan before us fails to address those concerns with any other alternative proposals and/or choices. If we consult with residents, we have a duty to listen and respond. It should not be dismissed as NIMBYism, otherwise residents would be right in thinking that their views will have little influence on decisions. The reason for my challenge is that if you look at the population density in each of the settlements based on the 2011 census, Basildon has 26.2 people per hectare, excluding Pitsea South East, Wickford 21.2 and Billericay 9.8. To me, this revelation, coupled with the fact that Basildon has been earmarked to take the brunt of the employment land, 48 hectares, is of great concern to me, as it would seem that there is a great disparity in this draft local plan which disadvantages Basildon residents who in this plan are being well and truly shafted. It is also considered morally wrong that the leader is aware that the government body Public Health England already attributes 5.5% of adult deaths in Basildon to PM 2.5 exposure. No amount of tree planting will compensate for 10,152 homes, including Bowes, Gifford and the plotlands, in the plan period, 48 hectares of additional employment land, that's 115 acres, the loss of 720 acres of greenbelt, and the impact that will all have on our roads and air quality in Basildon. I would be interested to learn what the predicted population density figures would be in each of the towns post-development based on the plan that's before us. Secondly, the loss of greenbelt was also of great concern to residents who responded to the core strategy consultation. I understand that we have capacity for 29,000 homes on the greenbelt, but the job of sifting those sites out has already been done for us, with no opportunity for members or residents to have a say in that. The draft local plan is therefore considered by me as a fait accompli, to be presented to residents rather than providing open and transparent options for consultation. For example, I am aware of a master plan that was developed by Commercial Estates Group, November 2015, which has been consulted upon with Billericay residents, and I can see no good reason why this land, east of Mill Meadows, has not been put forward in our local plan, despite the fact it only partly meets the purposes of Greenbelt. It could deliver 350 homes, as I understand it. Why is it not shown as an option then, and what other sites across the borough have been considered and dismissed? To sum up, we are in the business of developing a plan for the entire borough, for the benefit of residents who live and work here. Of course, we have to go out to consultation, but we need to listen to the consultation results of the core strategy, and that should have informed and evolved a revised local plan draft. Yeah. My specific options have been listed already as part of the Councillor Shepherd's summary, basically, and mine was objection 1. Thank you.
What I'm now going to do is to adjourn the meeting for 10 minutes to allow groups to consider the amendment. Can I start with Councillor David Harrison, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I just say, first of all, on Tuesday evening, my policy review subcommittee discussed how we dealt with the process in preparing the local plan. Not what's in the local plan, but the process and how it was prepared. And it was unanimous by that committee that the robustness and the way it had been done was very well done and appropriate. All members of the council were invited, if they wished to come to that committee and make comments. Councillor Allport-Hodge did do that, to her credit, but not one of these items was raised at that meeting when officers would have had the opportunity to have responded to each of these items on there. Tonight, they haven't got that opportunity, so are they correct, what she says? Are there good answers to them? I don't know. For that reason, I'll be abstaining, because some of them may be right. She mentions the green belt and travellers. It was agreed by the working group that 3 areas will be left and dealt with at a later date: green belt, gypsies and travellers, highways, roads with infrastructure, for more scrutiny so that input could be made on the final local plan when it's put to the government. That is important, and I think if we stick to that process, it will work. Scrutiny has performed a good function this time. It may not have done last time, and I think the local plan is important. I'll be abstaining on this.
Thank you. Now call Councillor Gavin Callaghan, please.
Please put their hands up.
Councillor Frank Ferguson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This draft plan flies in the face of the essential principles of Greenbelt policy, namely 1, to check the unrestricted sprawl of large built-up areas, 2, to prevent neighbouring towns merging into one another, 3, to assist in safeguarding the countryside from encroachment, 4, to preserve the setting and special character of historic towns, and 5, to assist in urban regeneration by encouraging the recycling of derelict and other urban land. The plan proposes building right up to the western boundary of the borough, south of the A127, eliminating the green belt entirely at this point and opening the way for Brentwood to merge with Basildon. Although Dunton could not be called a town as such, it will nevertheless destroy the historic character of this village. On the other side of the town, the plan proposes building in the small gap which currently exists between Fitzy and Bowers Gifford. This will reduce the green belt buffer zone by as much as 2/3 in an area where, in the recent past, a planning inspector supported the council's refusal to allow development. This will inevitably culminate in the merging of the 2 places. It is utterly hypocritical of the administration to be proposing this. Having followed newsworthy stories about Castle Point's local plan preparations, Rebecca Harris, the MP, has made it quite clear that there are no government targets for house building. Councils have to project their projected need, apply constraints such as Greenbelt, and then show what they can achieve. I note we are planning for in excess of 15,500 homes in the plan period. I also note that Castle Point have adopted the future housing requirement of 4,000, as indicated in the South Essex SHMA. I note that Basildon's equivalent in that document is for 13,800 homes. I would argue that the 15,500 is an unnecessary over-provision. So what guidance has been given to our planners and by which elected councillors? I've also familiarised myself with the Department for Communities and Local Government Planning Policy for traveller sites issued in August. Policy E covers traveller sites in Greenbelt. It clearly states that traveller sites, temporary or permanent, in the Greenbelt are inappropriate development and that unmet needs are unlikely to clearly outweigh harm to the Greenbelt and any other harm so as to establish very special circumstances. My specific objections to the local draft plan going out to consultation is that, one, we have failed to minimise developments in the green belt, and especially in the very critical policy areas, policy H13 and H10, to which Councillor Shepherd referred. We have included traveller sites in the green belt contrary to planning policy. 3, that no alternative sites and options are included in the consultation document. And 4, that the OAN is considered an unnecessary over-provision. Thank you.
I now call Councillor Phil Radcliffe.
Thank you, Chairman. I brought this in my executive briefcase this evening. I find a lot of sympathy with this amendment, but at the same time, there are other questions that sort of do come to me. I mean, it strikes me that what we're here to do tonight is to agree to go out to consultation. It's the views of people out there which is important. I'm sure that right across this chamber there are objections to actually what's in the content here. I mean, I would mention, for example, the total ignoring of the needs for social housing, which I think is definitely a gap within there. Councillor Harrison quite rightly pointed out that at the scrutiny subcommittee the other evening there was agreement, unanimous agreement between all members as far as the robustness of the process. And it was the process, not the content, which I keep on coming back to. I think it's very inevitably during this debate, even though we've been reminded that we're talking about going out to consultation, not the content of the plan itself, members will quite rightly raise concerns about the content and will continue the debate and encourage people to participate in the consultation and to participate themselves. To me, this is a Billericay bias document. For years, what we have seen is building in the new town, the monstrosity of Gloucester Park there, driving along Nicholas Lane and seeing the Ballards Walk development. My granddaughter calls that Pudding Wood because there's a story for sort of little tots about Pudding Wood and people developing and building houses on this sort of natural, lovely spot. And this is what's happened to Basildon. And okay, we've got our views on it. Now what worries me, and to be frank, I haven't made up my mind yet which way I'm going to vote on this, to be honest. And I'd like to hear during the debate from other councillors, and I hope Councillor Moore will come into the debate on the amendment and explain to us quite clearly what would be the effect on us and what are the risks to us if we delay this process this evening. And do we put a time limit if we decide to send it back to the Cabinet again? These are the sort of questions we have to think very seriously about the way that we're going to vote. I've got sympathy with a lot of points that are in the amendment. As I say, I'm not sure which way to vote. All I do know, this isn't a plan that I would have written, but then again, that's not my job. My job is to go out and talk to the people I represent about it, to make my views clear so that they can make their views as well. But I do look forward to what other people have got to say, and I'll be guided in my votes into the arguments that are put forward there. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Mayor, sorry.
Let's call Councillor Stephen Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Not had full opportunity to read the entire document over the last 48 hours, but I have spoken to some of the people in Pitsea South East and here's some of the feedback from it. Me, I'm pretty incensed by it, and so are they. and upon reading chapter 3, represents and presents the spatial portrait of the borough and talks about the population and demography. It appears that the entire catalyst for this population plan of 15,500 homes and 49 hectares of employment land is due to the ageing population, is what it states. Ageing populations, interesting statement. You talk about it being evidence-based, then I'd like to find out about how the ageing population is going to bring about 15,500 homes, with the majority in Basildon. I didn't realise that we were all getting that old, and that many of us. We know the difference. I believe it's deceitful not to state the facts. The Office of National Statistics states the population is expected to increase by 4.4 million in the next decade, before reaching 70 million in 2027, so we're only 11 years away. That increase is roughly the size of the Irish Republic. Interesting to see that that's all down to an ageing population. The population is projected to grow by 9.7 million over the next 25 years to 74.3 million. The latest figures show that there are 64.6 million people in the UK. And the infrastructure is already straining, so I'd like to know more about how we're going to cope with this on the infrastructure.
Yep.
The people that have spoken about this are asking about the ambulance, the fire service, the policing, the hospitals. The roads are already at gridlock, so how are we going to support another potential 15,000 homes if they only have 3 people in there, another 45,000 people in the area. There are 64 million people living in the UK. That's 491,000 more than the previous year. That's 259,700 added from net migration, 226,200 from natural growth. 25% of all births in 2013 were mothers born outside the UK. It's about time that the Tory government, and the weak excuse for a leader, stopped the pretences and told the residents about the full impact of open door policies. The Tory administration, some of it indicated they opposed building on the Greenbelt in their pre-election promises, and have yet not stood up to that. And the administration to support the plan that yields no less than 113 acres of Greenbelt, which is just about to be disappeared in the hands of your administration, of which I am incensed by. I note that most of the loss is in Basildon. Again, it would appear, therefore, this Tory administration, whilst supporting the Tory government policy for growth, only supports the majority of growth in Basildon. Disproportionate, not justifiable, and you're putting it all back in Basildon. And I agree with Councillor Ratcliffe, exactly that. Ratley, is it? Ratley. Agree with him, exactly what he says about protecting Billericay yet again. It's disproportionate, and I welcome the government coming down, because I think they'll do it proportionately. My specific objections to the draft plan, along with the people that I've spoken to in the local area, it fails to acknowledge the impact of open door borderless Britain. It fails to acknowledge the importance of being asked to sacrifice the Greenbelt to cater for the London overspill, which is a requirement under the MPPF. Be honest with the residents, stop clouding the issues, let us know exactly what it is. Be proportionate in your distribution. And then also what you're voting for. If you made the pledge, no more building on Greenbelt, and you turn around and betray the people that voted for you, shame on you. The purpose of consultation is to provide viable options, and I see no alternative options to this draft plan. And in fact, one of the things that we used to have when I was in the police was they would write FLOB on the document, and I will not be supporting this document.
Call Councillor David Dance.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to ask the question be put because I'm of the opinion that when we heard from the leader of UKIP that she says she's in the business of, and I thought she was going to say politics, because that's exactly what they're doing.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. You can only move the question be put without any discussion. Once it's seconded, you then decide whether to have the question be put or not.
Yeah.
Politicians are doing the job.
Mr. Chairman, so what I'm saying is that with the grandstanding, I think basically the question should be
Truthful
put,
statements.
and that this document is about consultation. So the comments made can be made during the consultation. So I asked the question before.
Have you a seconder?
Second.
In my view, there has been adequate debate on this, so I will put that to the vote. All those in favour, please show. All those against, please show. Any abstentions? Any abstentions? That's carried. We'll now put the amendment to the vote. All those in favour, please show. And those against, please show. Any abstentions? Therefore, the amendment is lost, and we'll go back to the substantive. Sorry, you want to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. An amendment. Can Mr. Burke be sure? Oh, I'll just wait till members have had it.
So we just wait for that to go round?
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, this has already been voted on in our amendment. It's already in our amendment.
Mr. Mayor, it has not.
It cannot be brought a second time.
You want to read it properly, and I'd like to speak. Not the Mayor.
This amendment, please move your amendment and speak to it.
Mr. Mayor.
Lovely. Thank you, Mr.
Mr.
Mayor.
Mayor,
Please
it
be
is a
quiet. You
repeat.
do not control council.
It is a repeat
Yet
of an
again.
amendment that's already been voted upon.
Mr. Mayor,
We'll adjourn for a minute.
how long are we adjourning for, Mr. Mayor?
There's different types of meetings. This is a special one because it's kind of 20. I've only been to a couple,
Councillor, have you a second?
Yes, Councillor Claxton. May I proceed, Mr. Mayor?
Would you like to proceed, please?
Lovely, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to make 2 points in the local plan to be reviewed and possibly pulled out, because obviously when this consultation process goes forward, there's 2 controversial sites. One of them is Dunton Garden suburb, which also has another acronym, West Basildon Urban Extension. Now, we're not sure what Brentwood Council is going to do, but their consultations, 84% of residents against the Dunton Garden suburb. Our consultations said 86% of people consulted were against. So I think the residents' views on both sides of borough boundaries are pretty clear.
Yes.
And it should be withdrawn. And also, Borough Council like sticking all their problems in Dunton on their boundaries. Solar farm, their planning committee has passed 50 luxury homes on Greenbelt land. Now, if we don't look after Dunton, that'll be gone. That'll be a town urbanised, gone forever. So I think that needs to be withdrawn from the local plan. The residents' views are pretty clear. Both of the borough's members of parliament at the general election made their views clear that they were opposed to Dunton Garden suburb. So we can pull them on to support us and take the battle with government, because if we are to live under the threat of the cosh of government stepping in, that's what our members of parliament are here to do, our advocates in parliament. The second site I wish withdrawn from this local plan is Dry Street. Residents on their own backs and out their own pockets via the Green Action Agreement are fighting hard to get a judicial review which is in the process of being dealt with. Now if that is successful and the outlining planning that was granted in the summer of 2013 is enough, and it has to seek new planning to possibly develop the site, if we've said that's okay in the local plan, whoever's on the planning committee will have their hands tied. And that's why, Mr Chairman, Dry Street, as cited in the local plan, we've got here tonight to consider, to put out to consultation, and the Dunton Garden suburb stroke West Basildon urban extension, whichever you wish to call it, needs to be pulled out of this local plan. Now, residents' views are clear, and I think we should listen to the people who have spoken so far.
Yep, yep.
There's a second I wish to speak. It's now open for debate. Councillor Hodge.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll leave the lengthy response for Councillor Mark Ellis, who is wanting to speak on this subject. I wanted to say that we will be supporting this motion because it was in fact already moved under item 4, where we stated we have failed to minimise developments in the Greenbelt, and especially in the very critical areas, policy H13, land east of Basildon, and H10, West Basildon urban extension, and the Dunton extension, and no alternative sites found. So basically, it was an objection of ours, which fundamentally Councillor Smith voted against.
Councillor Ellis, speak.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm in support of Mr Smith, Councillor Smith, should I say, and I'm extremely disappointed to see the incorporation of policies E7, Dunton Extension, and policy H10, the West Basildon Urban Extension, in this draft local plan. As part of this council's duty to cooperate with other authorities in preparation of our local plan, Basildon conducted a consultation with Brentford Council on the proposal for Dunton Garden suburb of local residents commencing in January last year. No less, as Councillor Smith said, no less than 84% of respondents opposed the plan, and most of those objections were deemed valid. Yet it is here in the draft local plan with no other alternative option site included in the document. The proposed site impinges on green belt land and is situated on the outer fringes of Brentwood. Increasingly, there are calls to allow building on green belt. Our green belt is the envy of the world, believe it or not. It's a green lung. It provides space for recreation and is a check against unsustainable urban sprawl. Once it is paved over, it is gone forever. Inexplicably, a habitat assessment carried out on behalf of the Brentwood and Basildon councils for this development missed a local wildlife site within the location, running from Eastland Springs through woodlands along the Mardyke tributary and another potential wildlife site in Green Meadows. These were listed in Brentwood's Wildlife Site Review in 2012. The Basildon Borough adjoins Brentwood, and the Green Belt. The Basildon Borough adjoins Brentwood, and the Green Belt exists to prevent urban sprawl and serves the purpose of keeping the main urban areas of the two towns separate. Brentwood are considering building up to the boundary line. There is only 400 metres of land that currently separates our two boroughs. The challenge for us is to ensure is to ensure that as the borough evolves, developments are carefully planned to maintain separation of the people from known areas of poor air quality, and that includes locating housing developments away from economic development land and away from congestions, particularly with the proposed widening of the A127. For these reasons stated, this proposed site does not meet this criteria and should therefore be removed from the draft local plan before it goes out to consultation. As the council have already consulted with the local people, they don't want it, there are valid reasons to withdraw it. Thank you, Mayor.
Hear, hear.
Are there any other speakers on this? Oh, Councillor Ratcliffe, thank you.
Very briefly, Chair, I mean, it strikes me that what this amendment from Councillor Smith does is merely repeating something we've already rejected. And, you know, what I said sort of earlier on, and talking about repeating, I wanted to hear some opinions about the problems of not going out to consultation now, you know, the effects of delay. And what worries me here, because no one's given an explanation, and the debate on the earlier amendment was curtailed anyway, and I've not heard those sort of arguments, and it seems that what we're doing, despite all of us being aware of this, is debating the content of the plan, rather than the issue of it going out to consultation. We've all got our own views on the plan. I don't like a lot of it, but that will come out when we start talking. You know, whilst one can have sympathy, the sort of battle between the real UKIP and the nearly UKIP, you know, is really sort of, oh no, it's it's really sort of, you know, getting anywhere. You know, so I hope once we get this amendment out of the way and we start talking about the plan, that people on those benches particularly will help me to decide on my final vote by talking about the consequences of us not agreeing to go out of consultation, because that strikes me as being crucial. You know, I don't want the government to impose a plan on Basildon. This one's bad enough. Goodness knows what the Tory government will come up with. Thank you.
Councillor Peter Holland.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just like to really reflect on what Councillor Rackley has just said and endorse that, because one of the elements which I became aware of, unfortunately, I wasn't pre-warned on this one, was that Councillor Smith didn't really attend, as far as I'm aware, any of the sessions that we had on the Monday. Was that the whole lot, was it?
No,
3 out of 5.
I think, no, about one.
3 actually, now.
Yeah. In that case, I stand corrected, but the implication is that the way that these meetings were performed, which was in fact very, very informative, it seems to me that you needed to attend probably the 4 sessions in order to get a compilation of what exactly we're talking about, and to try to isolate 1 or 2 items from what was, 4 sessions we had? 5 sessions, yeah. I'm a little bit surprised that was selected, and it's unfortunate that it comes on the back of a very well prepared document from Councillor Allport Hodge, but I'd have to agree that we've been down this road. We've been to this rodeo before. So I think, unfortunately, on this particular one, I'm going to have to back out of this support for this as well. Thank you.
Are there any other speakers? Okay. We'll take the vote then. All those in favour, please show of the amendment. All those against. Are there any abstentions? The amendment is lost. We will have a comfort break, but just before you go, can I please remind everyone that the refreshments are for elected members and council officers, please.
None of you. So we pay for it. No, but we pay for it. Yeah. We can't share it. No, that's right.
Next on my list is Councillor David Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I say first of all that prior to 2014 being elected to this council, Councillor Alan Ball and myself were highly critical of Basildon Council for lack of a local plan. We believe, sincerely, you must have a local plan. Members tonight, we may not all agree what is proposed, but I hope the people that make these grandstanding speeches tonight, they will be the comments they put in on the consultation, because people who do not participate in the consultation cannot turn around afterwards and say, we wouldn't want this, we didn't want that. I encourage everybody to participate. In Wickford, Wickford Independents will be organising a public meeting ourselves to try and get people in, so they understand what's going on. We may all agree with the local people of Wickford, but it's important they have their say. Can I just say this, that the local plan, someone held up the big part of the reports over there. The one we've got is quite substantial. Can I ask Councillor Moore that when this goes out for consultation, will he organise a more concise, easy to read thing indicating exactly what is proposed for each area, so the public can see that quite clearly, without all the supportive bump about the planning law and SHMA, whatever it's called, all these things which people do not really understand. What they understand is X number of houses there, X number of houses here, and that's what they want to comment upon. They need to comment to make sure the infrastructure which they need in their town is provided for, and make comments if it's not in the local plan, and ensure it's their view and it's put in the local plan. You see, tonight we've mentioned Dunton and what's happening there with Brentwood. I didn't see Councillor Allport Hodge stand up and say there might be problems in Wickford as well. What Rochford are proposing, 500 houses just to the other side of Shopgate. I didn't hear her criticise Chelmsford building 575 houses at Rumwell, just a mile and a half up the road from Wickford. I think we've got to look at the whole borough. It's very important, and the local plan, we may not like it. We may not like some of the things in it, but tonight it's about the consultation, and it's ensuring it goes out, the people have a look at it, they have their input, and then we can make a decision later on. You know, otherwise we could go home, couldn't we? We all agree on that, I think. So why not let's vote on that and go home?
Councillor Callahan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Happy New Year to everybody. Happy May I say from the outset that I'm pleased that everyone in Cabinet did listen to the wishes of the Overview and Scrutiny Subcommittee and to fellow group leaders and dropped the seal from the recommendation this evening. Councillors are tasked with a very important role of scrutinising this, and it is important that we have done that properly, so I thank them for it. As has already been said tonight, we are not voting on the intricacies of the draft local plan. We are simply voting on whether or not the public have a say, and it is important that we put that on record. Clearly, there are many issues and underlying policies that my group have with this document. And if I give you one example, and I encourage residents to look into this in more detail when this goes out to consultation, and that is on the issue of GP provision. Members will know that I've raised this in this council before around the Basildon and Brentwood CCG draft 5-year plan. If they look at the draft 5-year plan, they will see that in 2020 we are projected to have around 12 million GP floor space deficit in this borough. The draft local plan puts down just one additional GP practice in the Basildon borough and then says that they will upgrade the other existing GP surgeries. Now I know that this is not the fault of the council, that this is a submission that came to us from the CCG, and I think it's worth putting on the record, Mr Mayor, our disappointment at the fairly lacklustre response from the CCG to that, because our residents tonight to assume that every single existing GP practice is to be upgraded. Where exactly will this new GP practice be? Will it be in the southeast of the borough to accommodate the Pitsea development? Will it be in the west to accommodate Dunton? Where will it be? And I think it would have been better, and I'm sure members will have agreed, that if we could have pinpointed that in this draft plan. So I would encourage the council to look at that with the CCG. It's also worth noting, in a week in which Basildon Hospital has been placed on black alert, whether or not they have anything to say about this and if they plan to increase capacity there. And I raise this point particularly with you, Mr Mayor, because council members will know, at least those of us who knock on doors, that actually the infrastructure is perhaps more important to many residents than the number game itself. And it is crucial that we look at that, and I ask my residents in Pitsea North West, and Labour councillors will be doing the same across our wards, about that very issue, to look at that and to make sure that they respond to it. I don't see any reason to delay public involvement in the consultation process, and I would like to put the thanks of my group, Mr Mayor, to planning officers for their diligence in the way they've engaged with our members throughout the last 7 weeks or so on this, and for the planning members of my group a lot longer than that. The scrutiny sessions were informative. They helped, I think, to debunk many of the myths that were around the local plan before it was publicised. So I suppose to that end I better pay tribute to Councillor Baggott and the overview and scrutiny officers for the work they've done in facilitating this. I'm sure he will be rewarded. I would also be interested when Councillor Moore comes to sum up, if he would explain the details of how the council plans to conduct the consultation. Are roadshows going to be put on in each of our wards in different parts of the borough? Will he tonight accept my invitation to come to the Pitsea Community Panel meeting in February and present the ideas here to the Pitsea public? And in what way will members of the public who are not online or who have a disability be able to make their submission as well? Mr Mayor, I think it is worth putting into a broader context the plan tonight. I've only been in local government since 2012, but I have quickly learned that the most often feared word is development. And it is too often portrayed as a negative, when in fact it can be real opportunity for us. We've heard tonight, don't build on the greenbelt, don't build here, don't build there, usually by people who own their own homes and are quite comfortable. Tonight I'm speaking for the people like myself who don't own a home but want to own one in Basildon, because we are at risk of losing a whole generation of young people from this borough who want to live here, who want to be close to their friends and their family who they grew up with, but frankly have nowhere to live. And that is what is in front of us tonight, and we should think about that. The other point to raise, Mr Mayor, is that if we don't engage in this process, then Gloucester Park will be built on. Dry Street will happen again, it will repeat itself. Northlands Park, I promise you I will stop in a minute. Northlands Park will also redevelopment there that we don't want. So it is crucial that we have a local plan and that we engage in this process. There are issues around council tax retention, the way in which councils are going to have to be self-sufficient. We are going to be living and breathing by what we collect in council tax, so we therefore are going to need to broaden that council tax base, which will mean more homes so that we can provide services for our residents. A whole host of reasons why I think the public consultation should start, and we should kick this process off. That's why we really support it, Mr Mayor.
I'll call Councillor Phil Rackley, please.
I haven't indicated.
Okay. Did you want to speak now? Or?
No.
Councillor Peter Holloman, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I heard a phrase mentioned earlier on this evening, which was fait accompli. which, as I understand it, means that you've got no other option. Strangely enough, it is strange for my core belief, I'm not concerned with the numbers of houses going up. That really is something which is going to happen. It either happens now or it happens in a few years' time, and people need to be housed. So I think that's the description of fait accompli. It's going to happen. So we accept that. But I wanted to address, in the modern vernacular, the elephant in the room. And I'm not looking at anybody here. Trust me. And as far as I can see, the downside of this is that in that very informative report, there was, quite rightly, no weighting put to any one section. And I think that's obviously as it should be. People need to make up their minds on how important any one section is. But in fact, I looked at that report in terms of where does this all fit together? And what is the big downside? Where is the elephant in the room? And the elephant in the room on this particular case comes down to two words. The first one, everybody here is on the tip of their tongue, which is infrastructure. Mm-hmm. Great, that's obviously an important element to it. But the second element of it is movement. And it's impossible to have infrastructure that works without movement. And here is where I have a real big concern, because although at this stage I fully support what we're doing, and I will be voting for this, my big concern is that as movement is so important to the success of all of this project, is the one thing that this council and this borough has no control over whatsoever. I noticed a few comments in the document saying we will discuss this with. Well, we're at the last minute here of something going to happen which is going to change this borough forever. Mm. And we're using phrases such as we will discuss with. Now, personally, I have a thought, if we're looking at infrastructure, the most important part of infrastructure is how do you get around it. Councillor Gallan talked about GP practices and other schools, and yeah, this is all great, but these are infrastructure. People have to get to and from these premises. And we are at chock-a-block already in all our roads and junctions. And yet we're advocating putting another, well, whatever, pluck a figure out the air of how many thousands more houses. The houses are not the issue. The issue is where do you go from your house, how do you get there, and how do you get back? And I just find it very, very concerning that this has been put on the back burner, and I'm aware that when this goes out to consultation, the public will be looking at it, but I'm almost guarantee, because I do it myself, the public will be looking at the numbers of houses. And the words infrastructure will be coming up, but there'll be very little interest put in the actual movement of people, cars around the borough. And I would just urge, certainly Councillor Moore, if he's got any input into this one, that this is moved up the agenda to be looked at. In fact, that's more urgent on my book than actual numbers of houses. Because if you can't get to your house and you can't get away from it, there's no point having the houses there in the first place. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Can I call Councillor Stephen Hodge, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too have concerns about this draft local plan going out to consultation. We are told that the drive and the aspiration for the borough and Greater Essex is to achieve economic growth. Following the consultation on the local plan core strategy revised preferred options, report one of the main issues raised was about the lack of detail provided in the plan. I note that the local plan period we aim to provide for over 15,500 homes, 49 hectares of economic development land. It would appear that we are planning to provide 8,600 jobs against a predicted 24,500 new residents. Examinations of the level of jobs available for working age residents identifies historically that the number of jobs available has increased in proportion with the increase in residents of working age. As a consequence, the jobs density has remained at 0.76 between 2000 and 2009. Now, over the same 10-year period, this compares to 0.77 jobs density in the East of England region in 2000, reducing to 0.76 in 2009. Examination of the commuting patterns data provided by the ONS following the 2001 census demonstrates that the highest percentage, 54.85%, of working residents of the Basildon Borough remain within the borough for employment. We've only been given 48 hours to study a document that resembles a tree stump. I am greatly concerned that the detail residents will need to make an informed decision about whether or not this plan will provide sufficient jobs for the predicted new residents is not shown. I am not convinced that we have the right balance between homes and jobs, and this local plan again provides a lack of detail on which residents are being asked for their views. We are in the business of developing a plan for the entire borough. Not only has sufficient homes, but sufficient jobs for predicting new residents. I note that the bulk of the employment land has been designated to Basildon, as opposed to Wickford and Billericay. There may be good reasons for doing so, but this plan does not set out any alternative localities, options on which residents' views can be sought. My specific objections to the local plan going out to consultation is that it fails to provide sufficient detail in which residents can make an informed decision about whether or not they've got the balance right between home and jobs, and it fails to provide any alternative options for employment land across the borough. Thank you.
I now call Councillor Linda Allport-Hodge, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's critical that we have a local plan in place. All of us understand that. And it is critical that the public have a say on that plan, and that where possible we keep to the timetable. We are supportive of a plan going out to consultation. That's democracy. The bit that we're struggling with is the fact that the purpose of the consultation, as set out in the document, states that it is to seek the views of residents, businesses and other stakeholders on the draft policies and allocations set out in the draft local plan, and any reasonable alternatives to these policies and allocations as identified in the alternative option boxes. The bit we're struggling with is that there aren't any alternative options. Now, if there is an OAN figure, and as a result of the consultation, residents tell us that a particular site is unacceptable, it's not as though we can just withdraw that site. We would have to find an alternative location. And this document, to go out to consultation, does not provide those options, the what-ifs. And in my book, any consultation document that goes out on any issue, whether it's a local plan, or whether we want a bus shelter at the bottom of the road, has to have options in it, and this document fails to do so. Yes, we did participate in the scrutiny, and I too would like to extend my thanks to Councillor Baggett again. I have made it very clear that I felt that the sessions were very rewarding and helpful and informative. But Councillor Harrison will know that I did attend the last scrutiny meeting, and I did make my views known, but I felt that we did need to scrutinise the three issues that remained and had been highlighted and identified as being areas of concern to all members, which was the green belt, travellers and infrastructure. It's unfortunate that we've run out of time the reason given for us not being able to cover and scrutinise those 3 areas prior to this document going out to consultation was because there's insufficient time to do so. I find that abhorrent because this document is setting out, if you like, the blueprint for our residents for the future and for future generations. And what? Because we didn't have time to scrutinise those 3 areas and get the document right. It's important that the document that goes out has options in it and is reflective of what we believe is to be a sound base document. Anyway, I think I am sympathetic with all of the threats of what it will mean to us in the event that we don't get this plan out on time. But I'm not sympathetic to the fact that we haven't allowed a timetable sufficient to be able to cover all the edges. I do want to extend again, as I have already done so, my thanks to officers. It's a massive undertaking, and you're not, no one's going to please all of the people all of the time. But the professionalism and the information that's in the document is very professional, and the officers are to be commended for that. Okay, thank you very much.
I now call Aidan McGarrett.
Thank you very much. Hopefully won't take up too much of your time because a lot of the points have been touched on already. One thing I would say, however, I don't think anyone has actually used these words tonight, we are facing a housing crisis in Basildon Borough. We're not alone in that, but we are facing a housing crisis. And we have to be very honest about that because some of the decisions we will be taking are based around the fact this is a housing crisis. When I say a housing crisis in Basildon Borough, I don't just mean a housing crisis that affects Pitsea, or Basildon itself, or Leiden. The effect of the housing crisis actually affects every part of Basildon Borough, and that includes Billericay. All right? And I hope that the people of Billericay and those that represent them, and I'm pleased to see that there's a lot of things in this local plan that I have issues with. I'll come to some of them in a minute. But there are an awful lot of them. But I am pleased to see this council finally embracing the fact that difficult decisions about Greenbelt have to be faced. Those difficult decisions impinge on Billericay. And I hope the people of Billericay, those that represent them, will think long and hard about this and not just attempt to withdraw from the process. Because the housing crisis affects every part of this borough. And it's not enough to sit in Billericay gloating about how your house price is appreciated and living in this perfect little bubble. Because your children and your grandchildren have to be housed as well. And actually, ask yourselves the question, those residents live in Billericay and places like that, 20, 30 years ago, the houses that you are so proud of and now want to protect so much, what were they? Chances are they were fields. They were open spaces. So, whilst we need to be careful about how much open space, how many fields we sacrifice, we also have to be realistic. And quite frankly, those of us that represent Pitsea and Basildon wards have seen a lot of green spaces in our wards sacrificed, and it's not a revenge thing, but it's time that Billericay finally took on some of the burden of housing the people of this borough. Yeah. Now, I would say one other thing as well, a couple of other things as well. One of the things that fundamentally disappointing in this is 2 things. The element of affordable homes. At the moment, it's inadequate. There's reference to 25% and 36%. I know that the Labour group think both of those figures is inadequate. We will be talking to residents and urging them to take part in this process and urge that those figures are looked at. It's all very well building houses. They've got to be houses people can afford to live in. 2 very important words are not mentioned in here that I can see anyway. Social housing. Absolutely critical. How can we be contemplating the next 30-year plan, local plan, where social housing is not mentioned at all? I had the privilege to grow up in social housing, and I was fortunate for that time to, the family had a lifelong secure tenancy. Now, that's a different issue, but my feelings on that matter are very well documented as well. But certainly, this council has a duty and an obligation to be providing social housing. It is not out of our remit. We should be doing it, and I shall certainly be talking to residents to make sure that feedback is coming to you very clear and very loud. As Councillor Callaghan mentioned, infrastructure is absolutely vital. GPs places was mentioned, but all forms of infrastructure. And it's not good enough for us to provide the infrastructure retrospectively. If we're talking about planning, we have to have well-planned estates where the infrastructure is in place when the houses are in place and don't follow on years and years later. So I think that's very important, and again I hope that the consultation will take that on board and lots of useful feedback will come. As Councillor Callaghan said as well, in order for the consultation to be a success, it has to be a genuine consultation. We have to make sure that as many people as possible are contacted in as many ways as possible. The council needs to make itself available and not to hide this under a bushel. This is very little that the council will decide in the coming years is as important as this, and we need to make sure we get it right. Mindful of the time, I did say it'd be brief. Fortunately, the consultation is absolutely key. I am a Democrat. I believe in people being given a voice and acting on it accordingly. My faith in democracy may have been shaken a little over the last year or two. However, I still stand behind those principles. But we have to make sure this consultation is as thorough as possible so that Basildon gets the local plan it deserves and the housing it deserves. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. I now call Councillor Kerry Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Mayor. Actually, it would have been appropriate to say Mr. Chairman, because I wish to do with a matter that County, me and Councillor Headley was at a briefing regarding education, along with Councillor Buckley in the autumn, about secondary school places and primary school places provisions in the borough. And I asked in reference with Dunton Garden Suburb, what would be done for another secondary school place? And the attitude is, they go to the academy. There's plenty of space there. Sadly, Woodlands is oversubscribed, and maybe they might be able to stick an extra couple of forms of entry at James Ormsby. Now, if we're going to have so many houses in the new town, we've got to have another secondary school, and preferably what Amanda Arnold brought to full council last month, which is chamber approved of, and that would give the mix which employers would like, that greater skills and training, locally based people. But we can't have a local plan going forward without a demand for another secondary school, even if it's written in blood. Because County, from that briefing which me and Councillor Headley and Councillor Buckley attended, the attitude was, well, we'll make plenty of extra provisions for secondary school places in Billericay and Whitford, because that's where the parents want to go. The parents would like to send their kids to a local good school, and that's what we need in Basildon. That's what we really need in Basildon. People from Castle Point fighting to go to a new school in Basildon, and people from Brentford fighting to get to a good school in Basildon. That's what we want. We've got the best primary schools, Lee Chapel Primary, Great Berry, and many others. But the problem when it comes to secondary school is people vote with their feet. And we've got to have a good secondary school in the new town. You can talk.
There be no further speakers, so I will call on Councillor Moore to wind up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, it's been quite a long evening on one significant agenda item. I think I'd just like to start in my summing up with the issue that Councillor Rackley raised. He asked twice what the consequences are if we don't vote for the public consultation. I can tell him that as I did before, that the Prime Minister has publicly stated if we don't have a plan submitted by early next year, then the government will take over and do it for us. I don't want a local plan that is developed by civil servants in Whitehall who have no interest in our area. We might not have it completely right, but at least we all live here. So Following that, so much of the debate was taken up by amendments. We almost lost the point that tonight was about voting for the draft local plan to go out to public consultation. Councillor Harrison asked for a simpler format for the public consultation, and I can assure him we are working on precisely that. Councillor Callaghan raised the concerns about GP practices and so on, and I do agree with him. Infrastructure is very important, and he supported that we go out to public consultation. I should tell him, and I can't remember if he was there the other night, when we did say at the scrutiny meeting that we would be inviting the CCG to the scrutiny to give us their views. And he also emphasised the need to have a local plan, and also that we should have the public consultation. Councillor Holliman talked about the elephant in the room. I took it that was actually about roads, infrastructure. There are proposals in the plan. It is specifically addressed, and it is on the scrutiny list of things to look at. Councillor Stephen Hodge actually was concerned about the tree stump of paper, and he was very critical about the plan doesn't supply sufficient detail. Well, I don't know how much detail he wants. There is a very, very comprehensive evidence base that underpins the plan that you have seen tonight. He just has to access that. Councillor Alpott Hodge was struggling with the purpose of the consultation because there were no alternatives. Well, actually, when you look at the plan, there are quite a few alternatives, but in many cases those have been rejected, and the reasons for the rejection are stated in the plan. Councillor McGarren said that we're facing a housing crisis in the Basildon borough. I agree with that, and he said infrastructure is vital. I agree with that too. Councillor Kerry Smith raised the issue of the secondary school places. The detailed evidence base does address school places in considerable detail. So it is there. I'm afraid you just have to look for it. So I think, Mr. Mayor, that we should go to the recommendation.
Right, so we'll be voting on the revised recommendation. So can I ask all those in favour, please? Please go. All those against, please show. Are there any abstentions? Therefore, the motion is carried, and there is no urgent notice of any motion for debate, so I will now close the meeting. And thank you for your attendance. Thank you.